Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good day to everyone. I'm pleased to share my research article entitled External Religious Auditing in Islamic Banks, a pioneering evaluation of internal auditors. I am Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Fahmi Sheikh Hassan from the School of Business and Economics, UPM. This research article has been co-authored with Nur Farahin Muhammad Haridan and Dr. Sabarina Muhammad Shah, both from the same School of Business and Economics, UPM. Islamic banks have been established for decades, and the distinguishing feature of Islamic banking operation is its strict requirement to adhere to the Sharia or the Islamic law. Islamic banks also feature an additional governance layer where an independent Sharia board, or in this paper labeled as religious board, is given the responsibility to spur the prudence of Islamic banking by issuing religio-ethical compliance. Now, the competency and independence of each RB member will ascertain the effectiveness of religious compliance. Past studies have found that the RB have issued religious assurance without due diligence. This is due to the fact that there are some over-reliance on the compliant tasks performed by the internal management. Other than that, it is also well accepted that there is a shortage of technical skill and knowledge in conducting religious audit by the RBs. Some other researchers have found or made some claim that there's also non-existence of a clear audit framework for RBs to exercise due diligence in providing religious assurance. For that reason, external religious auditors, or ERA, as we label in this paper, could strengthen public confidence and improve the quality and uniformity of the audit process, as have been suggested by several authorities or regulators such as IOFI and UKIFC and ISRA 2016. However, no details have been prescribed on how banks should delineate the role of religious assurance from RB to ERA. As such, the following research objectives have been established. Number one, to investigate the expected role and competency of an ERA. Number two, to explore the implications produced by its implementation in Malaysian Islamic banks. And number three, to clarify how Islamic banks should delineate the role of religious assurance from RB to ERA. Now I come to the literature review section of the presentation. Various empirical studies have highlighted several impediments on the role of RB. For example, some studies suggest that there are lack of standardization in the governance of religious audits and a shortage of qualified and independent religious auditors. Meanwhile, some others have argued that the management of Islamic banks tend to limit the RB role and to avoid the supervision and audit role on RB on the adherence to the Islamic law. Meanwhile, RBs have been argued to have delegated the religious compliance role and function to the internal religious compliance unit. Now, due to the above, these elements question the fundamental concepts of independence and competence that are necessary for RB to provide independent religious assurance. In the conventional setting, an external auditor provides only normal, reasonable assurance. As I have highlighted earlier, UKIFC and ISRA in the year 2016 have conducted a study on the opportunities to establish ERA or external religious auditor and its developments in the global Islamic finance marketplace. The new role of the ERA would bring positive development to the IB by being competent and professionally assessing the religious compliance of the bank. However, it is unclear how one can delineate the responsibilities of RBs and the ERA. This study is a phenomenological study using semi-structured interview to gain an in-depth understanding of the expected role of ERA for quality religious assurance. 16 interviews were conducted from a total 11 Islamic banks, including 8 full-fledged Islamic banking institutions with 5 large, 2 medium, and 1 small-sized Islamic banks, while the other 3 are from 2 medium-sized development financial institutions and 1 small-sized Islamic window. All 16 internal auditors that have been interviewed have at least 5 years of experience performing religious audits, and the majority of them are qualified chartered Islamic finance professionals. In analyzing the interview data, we establish the themes emerge from the interview data. As much as possible, we try to establish these themes closely related to the objectives of our study. This section now presents the findings and discussion of our study. Now, the first theme emerged from our study based on the interview conducted is on the significance of ERA. Now, from the interviews, we find that ERA could provide additional value and greater investments in building up the Islamic bank's reputation of issuing quality religious assurance. Now, this statement is based on various interview findings, but here I present 2 of the important quotations that provide such conclusion. For example, here in this later or second box, it is said that ERA is expected to have the abilities in providing recommendations to their audit client, as they have experience in engaging with several other industries and clients. Now, this is a remark given by internal auditors of the medium-sized, full-fledged Islamic bank. The coordination between internal and external auditors could help the firm yield synergistic outcomes, such as higher quality audit and economic benefits. The internal auditor of the large-size, full-fledged Islamic banks remarked that we are expecting that they are also able to provide recommendations and other corrective audit procedures based on their judgment and finding. Maybe in some other way, the ERA has to get some further clarification from internal audit to explain certain procedures and coding system, as different bank has different set of codes and system used. The second theme emerged is labeled as ERA competency. Now, we find that ERA's sufficient knowledge and experience in performing audits with several clients in various industries can bring about essential elements to provide further recommendations for the Islamic bank to perform better. The first quotation here from an internal auditor of Bank A, a medium-sized Islamic bank, saying, for me, I would say that an ERA is one who is professional, is well recognized, and possess greater independence when compared to internal auditors. They are in the position of having audit experience with various types of clients and being able to oversee issues greater than internal audit. The second one, for me, the external religious auditor or ERA will be more competent than the normal external auditor, as they work in a capacity of external assurance. They should have vast experience in auditing tasks, have more experience in handling and addressing several IB issues that occur in other banks. Thus, the ERA should be able to provide valuable advice as well as suggest the best practice and approaches to manage religious issues apart from controlling and securing their audit clients. Now, this is a quotation given from an internal auditor of Bank A, a small size, full-fledged Islamic bank. The following theme is on delineating the role of ERA and RB. The RBs are regarded as religious scholars who can deliberate on religious opinion or the fatwa regarding the products and contracts introduced by the Islamic banks. The effective communication between RB and ERA can bring about greater independence for identifying religious risk issues and finding any loophole in the new product development. Now, an internal auditor from Bank A, a large-size Islamic bank, remarked, banks still need a domain function of RB to further elaborate all the Islamic sources and school of thought, because only those knowledgeable in Islamic law can take all this into account when an IB plans to introduce a new product or contract, or even to address religious issues. Meanwhile, the religious auditor from Bank A of a large-size Islamic banks remarked, for me, the ERA inclusion provides additional characteristics and values of engaging with various Islamic banking issues in different banks that would enhance the quality religious assurance of the Islamic banks. The final theme I would like to highlight emerge from our interview data collection is on the challenges on ERA establishment. Now we find that with this additional governance role, of ERA, these would require several commitments, which include providing extra reports, as well as the requirement for additional tasks and time, which would or could be some burden to various parties affected. The internal auditor from Bank D remarked that when we require additional commitment and extra high-skill individual attachment, extra cost is charged to all banking operations, including the products offered to the customers. I wonder how Islamic banks will survive and compete with the expensive services when compared to the conventional counterparts. Internal auditor of Bank B, meanwhile, remarked, maybe in one aspect, the RB only offers views based on religious knowledge without considering the non-religious matters, such as the accounting, religious risk compliance and disclosure, law, and the others. Such a conflict of views can change the resolution made by the RB after the banks support the results found by the ERA. And for this, it is critical for regulators to outline clearly the functions, scope, and the role of ERA, hence eliminating the duplication of work and possible conflicting views on religious compliance. An internal auditor from Bank F remarked, in extending attestation to the annual report, ERA has a responsibility to provide reasonable opinion on the financial reporting of Islamic banks. Included in the annual report should be the result of internal control, disclosure, and risks relating to religious compliance. Now I come to the conclusion of this research article. ERA are expected to present dual religious and non-religious knowledge when performing this external religious audit assessment. The Islamic bank portfolio held by ERA will ensure Islamic banks' legitimacy in complying with religious faith, hence increasing the confidence of shareholders and other stakeholders. The effective communication between ERA and the current RB and other internal audit management will offer higher religious assurance and reduce the duplication of audit work. On the other note, there are these several challenges that could be faced by the establishment of ERA. Number one, there is currently no guidelines on external religious auditing. Number two, as we have discussed earlier, that with this establishment of ERA, there would be some additional costs to be borne by Islamic banks, which ultimately will be passed over to the customers. Then number three, the possible tension that could have arisen between ERA and the RB due to the diverse religious interpretations. I see that this study is important for regulation and policy promulgation for further development of the Islamic banking industry. This indeed is a study which provides first evidence to investigate the expected role and competency of an ERA and to explore the implications produced by its implementation in Malaysian Islamic banks. This study also clarifies how Islamic banks should delineate the role of religious assurance from the RB to the ERA. I thank you for your attention. Terima kasih. Thank you.